The Cry in the Forest. The forest was quiet except for the cold wind moving through the tall red trees. Jack walked slowly with an old metal axe in one hand and a small basket in the other. He came out every morning to collect fruit and herbs for tea. His cabin was far from the cities, and that was how he liked it. No one to bother him, no one to remind him of the war or the people he had lost. But this morning something was different. He paused near a broken tree trunk and listened. There it was again, a strange sound. Not wind, not any animal he knew. It was a soft whimper, like a baby trying to breathe and cry at the same time. Jack moved carefully, pushing aside branches and dried leaves. His boots made little noise on the soft moss. Then he saw it. A small shape curled under a dying bush. Its body was shaking. Scales covered its skin, but they looked dry and weak. Tiny wings folded tightly against its back. Its eyes were wide and glowing faint blue. It looked up at him. Not like a predator, not like a beast, but like something afraid. Something in pain. Jack stopped breathing for a second. His hands tightened around the axe. He had read about creatures like this. Alien dragons, mostly feared by farmers and soldiers. But this one, was just a baby. It made a quiet sound again, a pitiful cry that went straight into Jack's heart. He dropped the axe slowly and knelt down. The baby flinched, but didn't move away. Jack took off his thick jacket and reached out. Easy. I won't hurt you. His voice was calm, like he was talking to a lost child. The baby dragon didn't understand the words, but it understood the tone. It blinked, then allowed him to wrap it up in the jacket. The moment Jack touched its skin, he felt a strange warmth, not heat, like fire. Something gentle, alive, like it was trying to connect with him. He stood up, holding the tiny creature in his arms. It was light, too light. It hadn't eaten in days, maybe more. Jack hurried back to his cabin. The wind picked up and clouds rolled across the sky, but he didn't stop. The baby dragon moved once, then rested its head against his chest. Inside the cabin, he placed the little one near the heater. He found an old cloth and wrapped it tighter. Then he poured warm water in a bowl and set it down. The dragon sniffed it, then drank slowly. Jack watched carefully, still unsure if this was smart or stupid. He had no plan. No knowledge about alien creatures, just an empty house and a broken heart. He grabbed some cooked fish from his storage box and held out a piece. The baby looked up, hesitated, then opened its mouth slightly. Its teeth were sharp, but it didn't bite him. It took the fish gently and started chewing. Jack sat down beside it. Hours passed. The creature fell, asleep, curled like a cat, its tiny chest rising and falling. Jack leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. Why was it here? Where was its family? Was it lost? Abandoned, hunted? He didn't know. But something deep inside him whispered that this was no accident, that this meeting meant something. The wind outside grew louder. A soft thump came from the roof. Then another and another. Jack looked at the window. Nothing. He picked up his old rifle just in case and stepped outside. At first he saw only trees. But then, in the sky, shapes moved. Dark shadows flying in circles above his cabin. He froze wings. Lots of them. Huge creatures gliding just below the clouds. Dragons. Not one. Not two. A whole flock. They didn't attack. They didn't roar. They just circled, watching, waiting. Jack stepped back inside slowly. His eyes returned to the sleeping baby. He felt the weight of something bigger. Something coming, and it had already begun. The visitor at dawn. The sky turned orange as the first light touched. The edge of the forest, Jack had barely slept. He had sat beside the heater all night, watching the baby dragon breathe slowly. Its wings twitched sometimes like it was dreaming. Once or twice, it whimpered softly. And Jack whispered calm words to it, until it relaxed again. The wind outside had stopped. But something in the air still felt strange. He stood up and moved to the door. His rifle rested against the wall, but he didn't take it. He stepped outside into the cold morning air. His boots crunched lightly over the frosted ground. He looked up and froze wings, dozens of them. Large, dark shapes gliding in slow circles above his cabin. Each one moved without a sound. Not birds, not machines. Dragons. Jack felt his chest tighten. He raised a hand to shield his eyes as one of the creatures flew lower. Its wingspan was huge. Its eyes were glowing like burning stars. It didn't scream or roar. It just looked at him, then veered off and returned to the sky. Another dragon descended, then another, until 5 of them stood at the edge of the clearing. Their claws dug into the soil. Their heads lowered slightly. They were waiting. Jack backed toward the cabin door but didn't go in. He didn't know what would happen next. Would they attack? Were they angry? Had they come for the baby? Behind him, a small chirp came from inside. The baby dragon had woken. It stumbled toward the open door, still wrapped in Jack's oversized jacket. It blinked at the morning light, then saw the dragons outside. It chirped again, louder this time, then stepped forward. Out the door, onto the dirt. Jack reached to stop it, but the baby looked up at him, and he understood. This was not his moment. It was theirs. The adult dragons moved forward slowly. Their tails dragged. Behind them, one of them let out a low hum that made the ground tremble. They formed a half circle around the baby. It looked up at each one and made a small sound. One of the larger dragons stepped closer. Its body was covered in scars. Its horns curved backward like a crown. It lowered its head to the baby, and the 2 touched foreheads. Jack stood completely still. The wind carried a faint smell of smoke, but there was no fire. Then the big dragon turned toward Jack. Its eyes locked onto his. They held no hate, only something older, something deep. It moved one claw forward and dropped something at his feet, a crystal pale blue, glowing softly. Jack stared at it. He didn't understand. He knelt and reached for the crystal. The moment his fingers touched it, a sharp warmth raced up his arm. He gasped and dropped it, but the crystal didn't fall. It floated in the air and a bright mark formed on the back of his hand. He stumbled backward, holding his wrist. The dragons all raised their heads, together, and let out a single long cry that echoed through the trees. It wasn't angry. It was something like a song. Low, powerful, sad, and strong. At the same time, birds scattered from the trees. Animals ran through the undergrowth. The whole forest seemed to shake. Then silence. The crystal faded and dropped to the ground. The mark on Jack's hand glowed. Once, then settled like a faint tattoo. He looked at the dragons. They were watching him now, but it was different. Like they saw something in him, like they had chosen. The baby dragon returned to his side. It nuzzled against his leg like a cat would. Jack slowly reached down and touched its head. His heart was racing, but his hands were calm. He picked up the crystal carefully. It felt warm, but peaceful now, like it knew him. The dragons began to back away one by one. They returned to the air, their wings opening wide, then lifting them into the morning sky. Only the scarred one stayed a little longer. It looked at the baby, then at Jack, then turned and leapt into the air with a heavy beat of wings. The flock vanished into the clouds. Jack stood in the clearing with the crystal in one hand and the baby dragon at his feet. He had no idea what had just happened, no clue what the mark meant, but he knew this was only the beginning. He whispered to himself, "What did I just become?" And somewhere deep in the woods, a hidden pair of eyes watched from the shadows. Whispers filled the forest again. But this time, they were not of fear. They were of something returning, something old. The Mark of the Chosen. Jack sat at the edge of his small wooden bed staring at his hand. The mark glowed softly under his skin like faint blue fire trapped just beneath the surface. It didn't hurt, but it pulsed gently with every heartbeat. No matter how much he washed or scrubbed it, the symbol would not fade. It was shaped like a spiral of lines with small dots circling the edges. Something about it felt ancient, not human. The baby dragon was asleep again, curled on a thick towel beside the heater. Its tail wrapped around itself like a sleeping fox. Jack had tried to feed it again, but it only took a few bites, then lay down quietly. It trusted him now. That much was clear, but the rest of the world might not. He stood up and moved to the small table where his comm device blinked red. A new message had arrived. He tapped the screen and a robotic voice began reading the words aloud. Warning. Unidentified life forms detected in Civilian Zone Sector 9. All settlers advised to report any non-human contact immediately. Do not engage. Do not shelter. Repeat. Do not shelter. Observe. And report. Jack turned it off before the voice could finish. He already knew what it meant. He was in Sector 9, and he had not just seen the dragons. He had touched one, sheltered one, bonded with one. He looked at his hand again. What had they done to him? Why him? He didn't believe in fate. Not after what happened in the war. Too many good people died while bad ones lived. Fate was just a story. People told themselves to sleep at night. But this mark, this feeling, it was real. Suddenly the baby dragon lifted its head. Its ears twitched. It chirped twice, then growled softly. Jack turned and moved toward the window. He saw nothing at first, only trees' branches swaying gently in the morning breeze. Then, movement. A shadow passed through the trees. Then, another. Not dragons. Too small. Too fast. Jack grabbed his old rifle and stepped outside slowly. He moved around the side of the cabin, his boots silent on the cold ground. Then he saw them. 2 drones floating just above the tree line, scanning, recording, looking for something or someone. Jack cursed under his breath. If those drones saw the baby dragon, or the mark on his hand, they would send more than warnings next time. He backed away and returned inside. The baby dragon was now fully awake, watching him. Like it understood the danger too. Jack knelt beside it. He whispered calmly and touched the small creature's snout. We're in trouble. Little one. Big trouble. The baby made a soft clicking sound, then leaned forward and gently touched its head to Jack's marked hand. The moment it made contact, the mark glowed bright again. Blue light filled the room, and Jack saw something. Not a dream, not a memory, but a vision. Giant mountain under the stars. Dragons flying in circles around it. One of them falling from the sky, wounded and crying. Landing alone in the forest. Crying until someone came. Someone with kind eyes and strong hands. Jack stumbled back. The light vanished. The room was dark again. Only the heater hummed softly. He looked at the baby dragon. It was breathing fast but steady. Its eyes wide. Its wings twitching. What was that? Was it showing him something? Or had the mark let him see what the dragon felt? Jack didn't know. But now he was certain of one thing. This was a bond. Not just of care. Not just of kindness. It was deeper. It was chosen. He didn't understand why. But the dragons had marked him. Not as prey, not as a threat, but as something else, something important, and now others would come to find out why. He packed a small bag with tools, food, and water. Just in case, he wrapped the baby dragon in a warm cloth and placed it gently inside a travel pouch. It curled up without protest, trusting him fully. Now, he didn't know where to go yet, but staying here was no longer safe. Outside, the forest was quiet again, but the silence felt like a breath before a storm. Above him, the clouds began to darken, and far in the sky, a long shadow moved across the sun. Not a dragon, not a drone. A ship human, and it was coming fast. The hunters are coming. The sky cracked with a deep boom as the human ship pierced the clouds above the forest. Its engines roared louder than thunder, sending birds flying in all directions. Jack stood on his porch, staring up at the sharp, dark outline moving fast across the sky. It was a military patrol ship, heavy, class, and well-armed. The kind they only used when they expected a threat. His heart pounded inside his chest. They had seen the dragons. Or at least seen enough to come investigate. He stepped back inside and locked the door. Not that it would stop them if they wanted in, but it gave him a few seconds to think. The baby dragon peeked out from the cloth pouch. Its bright eyes looked up at him full of fear. Jack reached down and gently touched its head. "It's okay, I won't let them take you." He grabbed a small metal box from the corner of the room and opened it. Inside was an old comm unit, patched and dusty. He hadn't used it since his discharge from the war. But it still worked. He turned it on and set the frequency to open band. A voice came through almost instantly. "Unregistered heat signature detected in Sector 9. All citizens remain in your homes, unauthorized. Interaction with alien species is a direct violation of Peace Code. Article 17 security forces will land in 10 minutes. Stand by for inspection." Jack turned it off again. They were close, and they were not here to talk. He looked around the cabin. There was no hiding place strong enough to protect the baby. They would scan the house. They would find her. Unless he moved first. He grabbed a thick coat and wrapped it around his chest. Then secured the baby dragon inside his travel pouch and zipped it. Closed carefully, leaving space for air. The small creature curled up and stayed quiet, like it knew this was dangerous. Jack stepped out the back door and disappeared into the woods. His boots hit the soft ground, hard. Each step fast but controlled. He didn't run wildly. He knew this forest better than any drone or soldier. Behind him, the ship began landing. Its heavy legs dug deep into the earth as the engines hissed and cooled. A ramp lowered, and 4 armored soldiers stepped out. They carried scanner rods and rifles, their eyes hidden behind black visors. One of them kicked open the cabin door. They entered quickly. Another stayed outside watching the trees. But he didn't see Jack. He was already far beyond the scanners. He reached an old shelter he had built years ago. A small hideout dug under the roots of a massive tree. It had food, water, and a sleeping mat. He crawled inside and placed the baby dragon down gently. She opened her eyes slowly, but made no noise. Jack sat with his back against the dirt wall and listened. Voices in the distance, metal boots, walking commands being shouted. They were searching, but they wouldn't find anything in the cabin. Only an empty bed, a half-eaten meal, and a comm unit turned off. The minutes passed like hours. Then the wind carried something strange. A sharp sound like air tearing apart. Then another. Roars. Not engines. Not machines, dragons. Jack crawled out and looked through the branches. Shapes in the sky. Dragons flying fast. Circling the ship. The soldiers began shouting. Weapons powered on. One of them fired. A red bolt shot upward and exploded against a dragon's wing. The dragon roared in pain and fell crashing through the trees. Jack's fists tightened. He wanted to run. He wanted to stop them. But before he could move, the sky burned. Dozens of dragons dove from the clouds. Their wings stretched wide, their eyes glowing like fire. They didn't attack blindly. They surrounded the clearing, cutting off escape. The soldiers aimed their weapons but hesitated. They were trained, but not for this. Not for creatures that moved like wind and fire. Then one dragon. The scarred one. The leader landed between the ship and the others. It stood tall, roared once, and all other dragons stopped. Soldiers stood frozen, their guns still raised, but they didn't fire again. Jack stepped out of the forest slowly, his hands raised. I can explain. Please don't hurt them. The soldiers turned. They shouted at him to get down. But then, they saw the mark on his hand. Their leader lowered his weapon. What is that? Why is it glowing? Jack looked down. The mark pulsed again, bright and clear. The dragons all looked at him too, not as prey, not as enemy, as their voice. Fire and steel. Smoke rose slowly from the trees where the dragon had crashed. The forest was silent except for the soft hum of human weapons and the low growls from the dragons above. Jack stood in the middle with his hands still raised, his body tense and his heart beating hard against his ribs. The baby dragon inside his coat shifted nervously but didn't make a sound. She could sense the danger just like he could. The lead soldier stepped forward, his visor shifting colors as the scanner swept across Jack's body. His voice came through the helmet, cold and sharp. You're carrying an unauthorized alien life form. That's a violation of Article 17 of planetary law. You are ordered to surrender it immediately. Jack didn't move. He didn't speak right away. The dragons above watched closely. Even the scarred one stood still, eyes locked on Jack, like waiting for his next move. Jack took a slow breath, then lowered his hands just enough to reveal the glowing mark on his skin. They chose me. I didn't steal her. I saved her from dying. The soldier flinched slightly as the scanner beeped and flashed red. Biological connection detected, unknown. Bonding type. Subject may be a Class 5 empathic imprint. Another soldier aimed his weapon at Jack's chest. Then we have no choice. If the creature is bonded, we remove both. The dragons reacted instantly before a shot could fire. 3 dragons dropped from the sky and slammed between Jack and the soldiers. The ground shook. Wings spread wide, blocking all view of Jack. One dragon opened its mouth and fire swirled in its throat, but it didn't release it yet. The lead soldier yelled, "Stand down! Hold fire!" His voice cracked through the helmet, but the dragons didn't move away. Jack stepped forward, again his voice calm but loud enough for both sides to hear. "Stop! They don't want to fight. They just want her safe." He slowly unzipped the pouch and let the baby dragon peek out. She blinked against the sunlight, then looked toward the scarred one. Soft sound came from her throat, a kind of whimper mixed with a trill. It was sad and hopeful. The scarred dragon stepped forward slowly. It lowered its head until it was level with the baby. She reached out her tiny snout and touched his. The connection was clear. A father, a guardian, something ancient. Jack turned to the soldiers. Look, she's not dangerous. She's a child. She was dying. I didn't know what she was. I just saw someone in pain. The soldiers looked at each other. Their grips on their weapons loosened. But then a voice crackled through their comms. Control to ground team. Additional aerial scans show multiple heat signatures converging on your position. You are surrounded. Prepare for hostile extraction. The lead soldier cursed under his breath. We have to call in reinforcements. If you do that, Jack said quietly, you'll start a war. You can't win. He stepped toward them slowly, his hand still glowing, his voice steady. You don't understand. This mark, it's not just a bond. It's permission. It's a message. They're not just watching me. They're protecting me. And her, the soldier hesitated. Then to everyone's shock, the scarred dragon lowered its head and dropped something at the soldier's feet. A metallic object. Old, rust-covered. It looked like a human dog tag from the war decades ago. The soldier picked it up slowly and scanned it. This belonged to Commander Elias Rowe, lost during first contact missions, assumed dead. Jack nodded. The dragons found him. They kept it all this time. The scarred. One growled softly, not in anger. In mourning. The meaning was clear. They don't forget. They don't hate. They remember. They grieve. The baby dragon let out a soft cry and the flock above roared in response. Not a war cry, but a promise. The lead soldier slowly lowered his rifle, then turned to his team. We're leaving. Send a message to control. No threat found, just survivors. The others stared, but obeyed as the ship's engines began powering up again. The dragons stepped back. Jack stood quietly as the soldiers left and the ship lifted into the sky and disappeared beyond the trees. The forest grew still again. The baby dragon curled back inside Jack's coat. The scarred one turned to him and lowered his head once more. This time not in challenge, but in respect. Jack didn't bow. He just whispered softly, "Thank you for trusting me." The dragons took to the air one by one until only Jack and the baby remained under the sunlit sky. But he knew this wasn't the end. Something much larger had started. It had begun with fire and steel, but ended in something stronger. The trial of trust. The sun was setting behind the forest, turning the sky orange and red like fire resting on the trees. Jack sat on the cold ground beside a small stream, his coat wrapped tightly around the sleeping baby dragon. The silence felt heavier now. Not dangerous, but full. Full of questions. Full of eyes watching from the shadows. He had walked for hours deeper into the wild. Away from roads. Away from towns. Away from signals. The mark on his hand glowed gently in the dim light, like a quiet reminder that his life would never be the same again. He reached into his bag and pulled out the old human dog tag, the one the scarred dragon gave to the soldier Jack had. Kept it. It felt like it belonged with him now. Something told him it wasn't just a gift. It was a test. A symbol. The dragons had chosen to trust him, but now he had to prove he was worthy of it. Suddenly, the baby dragon stirred. She lifted her head and looked toward the trees, then let out a short chirp. Jack stood up slowly. Figures moved through the forest. Not soldiers. Not animals, but dragons. 7 of them. Not flying, walking. Each one larger than any land beast. Their scales shimmered in the twilight. They didn't roar. They didn't speak. They simply formed a wide circle around Jack and the baby. The scarred dragon stepped forward. He looked down at Jack with burning gold eyes, then opened his wings wide and slammed them down once. A gust of wind, rushed through the forest. And then something strange happened. A hologram appeared in the air between them, made of light and dust. It showed a human city, burning, exploding screams without sound, weapons firing in all directions, dragons falling from the sky. Then the image shifted, a smaller scene. A man with the same mark as Jack standing between dragons and soldiers. He was older, calmer. He raised one hand and both sides lowered their weapons. The image faded, and the scarred dragon pointed at Jack's chest with one massive claw. The message was clear. You are next. You are chosen. You must be the voice. Again. Jack's mouth went dry. He didn't know what to say. He was a farmer now, a quiet man, a broken man who wanted peace, not power, but the baby dragon looked up at him and made a soft sound like she believed, like she knew he was ready, even if he didn't. Jack took a deep breath and stepped toward the scarred dragon. He lifted his glowing hand and placed it gently on the dragon's snout. The mark flared. The forest lit up blue. And suddenly, Jack felt something pour into his mind. Not words, not pictures. Feelings. Loss, fire, hope, sorrow. A wish for peace. A cry for understanding. The dragons didn't want revenge. They wanted someone to speak for them, someone to help them survive in a world that feared their wings. Jack fell to one knee. Tears ran down his face without him noticing, not because he was scared, but because for the first time in years, he felt something that had died inside him long. Ego purpose, he stood again slowly, then nodded once. I'll do it. I'll speak for you. But they won't believe me unless you help me show them. The scarred dragon turned and let out a single long call into the sky. And from above, dozens of dragons began to descend, not in anger, not to destroy, but to witness. They landed around the clearing, each one carrying something strange. Old tools, rusty weapons, broken human gear from the First Contact War. They dropped them all at Jack's feet. Proof that they had kept these things, not to study or copy, but to remember. They remembered every human they had fought, and every human that showed them kindness. Jack looked around the clearing. The dragons stared at him, waiting. He raised both hands and shouted, "To the forest, then let them come. Let them see. I won't hide anymore." That night, for the first time in history, a beacon was lit in the heart of the dragon forest. Not a weapon, not a trap, but a symbol. A campfire where dragons and one human sat together, in silence but not in fear. A home for all. The stars shined bright above the clearing as if the sky itself was watching what was happening below. Jack sat near the fire's soft glow with the baby dragon curled beside him, her head resting on his leg, her breathing slow and peaceful around them. Dragons of every size and color sat in silence. Wings, folded eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Not a sound came from the forest. Even the wind had stilled. This was not a battle camp. It was something else. Something older than a war, a meeting of hearts. Not claws. Jack looked at the small device he had placed on the ground near the fire. It was a beacon, a signal transmitter. He had fixed it himself using broken pieces from the old war gear the dragons had given him. It was sending out only one message again and again. Come, no danger. Only truth. He didn't know who would answer. He didn't know if anyone would believe him. But he had to try. The dragons had given him trust. Now it was his turn to give them hope. Hours passed. Slowly. Then a sound, distant, mechanical. Not wings. Not claws engines. Jack stood up and moved to the edge of the clearing. Lights cut through the trees. A transport shuttle. Small, unarmed, It landed carefully on the soft ground. The door opened and 3 humans stepped out. Not soldiers, not commanders, scientists. Peace in voice. Jack's chest tightened. He didn't expect them to come so soon. Didn't expect them to come at all. One of them, an older woman with silver hair, stepped forward slowly. Her voice was calm, but her eyes showed fear. "Are we safe?" Jack nodded and waved her in. The baby dragon lifted her head but didn't growl. The dragons around the fire didn't move. The woman looked around in silence, then sat down near the fire. One by one, the others joined. No one spoke. There was nothing to say yet. Then the scarred dragon stepped forward, massive, powerful. But gentle, he looked at the humans, then at Jack. Then lowered his head slowly. The woman gasped. She looked at Jack and whispered, "He's not attacking. He's bowing." Jack nodded. He remembers the war. But he also remembers kindness. The woman took a deep breath and reached into her bag. She pulled out a small photo. A picture of a man in uniform. Commander Elias Rojak stared at it then, pulled the dog tag from his pocket and handed it to her. The dragons kept it safe. They remembered. The woman's hand shook as she held the tag. Tears filled her eyes. "He was my brother. He never came back. They said he was lost during a dragon ambush." Jack looked at the scarred dragon who now sat silently watching the fire. He wasn't lost. He was found. He died protecting a baby dragon from a burning forest. The woman covered her mouth. The dragons did not speak, but in their silence there was truth. The other scientists took notes, recorded everything, but their hands were calm, their eyes wide with wonder, not fear. Then the baby dragon stood up. She walked slowly to the woman, sniffed her hand, then gently licked her fingers. The woman smiled. "She's..." Jack knelt beside them. "She was dying when I found her. Alone and cold. Now she's alive because of their trust." The woman looked around, "And because of yours." Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next morning, more humans came. Not with guns, with cameras, with translators, with open hands. The dragons didn't run. They stayed. The forest became a new kind of place. A meeting ground, a school, a sanctuary. Children were brought to meet dragons, to learn their ways, to understand that fear can become friendship. Jack built a new home there. Not just a cabin, a center where humans and dragons could meet, share, and live. The baby dragon grew. Her wings stretched wide. She learned to fly, but always came back to Jack. Always landed beside him at night. The scarred dragon watched from the trees. Proud, quiet, protective. One day, Jack stood at the top of a small hill, watching dragons fly across the sky. The mark on his hand glowed faintly in the light. He smiled softly and whispered to no one, This is what peace looks like." Behind him, the wind carried a soft sound, the voice of a dragon and the laugh of a child together.